Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be covering Imperialdramon Blue, or as I like to call it, just Imperial Blue. And it is a pretty interesting deck because it can basically be broken down into two halves, where it's just like you could either play it blue or you could either play it green. So I just personally like the blue side a little bit more than the green side, but regardless, it's still a very interesting deck and very powerful deck nonetheless. So first, starting off with the Digitama, I'm running one copy of the Booster Set 2's DemiVeemon. So this DemiVeemon is pretty good because he gives the inheritable ability during your turn once per turn. If this Digimon becomes active during your main phase, then this Digimon gets a plus 1000 DP till the end of the turn. So a big part of Blue's identity is being able to stand for multiple attacks. So having DemiVeemon in here to just give us a little bit of a DP boost definitely will help us not only win some potential trades in case we don't attack into the opponent's security with jamming, but it's just an overall nice effect to have. But the main star of the show is going to be the brand new Booster Set 3 DemiVeemon, which I'm running 4 copies of. So this DemiVeemon is really good for the deck because the deck is really kind of jamming focused in a way, and he definitely rewards a lot of jamming plays. So he gives the inheritable ability when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has jamming, then we get to draw a card. So we have jamming on basically almost every single level, so his ability can definitely be activated multiple times if our Digimon isn't removed, and all of those draws, even though it is once per turn, all of those draws could still potentially add up to give us a lot of potential card advantage. So DemiVeemon is just an absolute fantastic card for letting us draw more cards. Next, on to the rookies. I'm playing 3 copies of Elecmon. So Elecmon is just the value vanilla card of the deck. He's really in here just because he's very cheap to play and very cheap to digivolve into. That's really kind of it. Next, I'm running 3 copies of Gabumon. So Gabumon is a pretty good card because he has a when played ability where we get to draw 1 card, and then he is also really cheap to digivolve into, so whether we digivolve into him to draw a card or play him from our hand to draw a card, he's going to be gaining us 1 card either way, and he's really, really good for that. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Booster Set 2 Veemon. So the Booster Set 2 Veemon is a card that synergizes more with when our Digimon becomes active, and he has a great inheritable ability that synergizes with that, where during our turn, once per turn, if this Digimon becomes active during our main phase, then we get to draw 1 card. So there is definitely a lot of ways to make your Digimon become active, so it's not necessarily the hardest thing in the world to be able to get the card draw off of Veemon. The last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new Booster Set 3 Veemon, and all this card does is he just has jamming. That's really all he does. He's very cheap to digivolve into, and he is really good with that jamming ability for doing some early aggressive plays, because we could really utilize the fact that he has jamming with the new DemiVeemon to start getting some extra card draws really, really early and start breaking the opponent's security really, really early on. And then we even have ways of protecting him or standing him up so that way he can't be swung into, and he's just a very, very solid card overall. Next, on to the champions. I'm running 4 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is in here for the only reason that he is very, very cheap to digivolve into for the champion level. That's really all he's in here for, is to help us get to our ultimates and megas a little bit faster. Next up, I'm running 2 copies of Booster Set 2 Veedramon. So Booster Set 2 Veedramon has some good jamming synergy, where if we have a blue tamer on our field, then he is going to gain jamming. So that's pretty good because obviously we have a big focus on jamming, and having him get jamming is really, really decent. Next, I'm running 2 copies of ExVeemon. So ExVeemon is just a really solid card for a lot of different reasons, just because he has so much synergy with a lot of our early game. So his ability is when you Digivolve into him, one of your level 4 or less Digimon become active. So this could include himself, this could include something else that's on your field. Either way, making our Digimon become active is very, very good because of all the potential synergies that he has with a lot of our early game. So as an example, you could use Veemon to attack with jamming and then Digivolve into ExVeemon to then make him active, on top of all of the potential synergies with the DemiVeemons and so forth. So ExVeemon is a really solid card to help a lot of our early game plays. And he's even potentially good late game, where if we are starting to build a slightly wide board, then we're not going to be Digivolving all the way up into Megas all the time. So just having him be able to grant us an additional attack potentially is still also a very, very powerful thing to think about. And then the last champion of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is in here just because he is the blocker of the deck. That's really the only reason. Next, I'm running 4 copies of Paildramon. So Paildramon is one of the better cards to Digivolve Imperialdramon with, obviously because he has the really solid inheritable ability for Imperialdramon, where he gives the when attacking ability once per turn. If this card's name contains Imperialdramon, this Digimon becomes active. So obviously, making Imperialdramon active means we get more attacks off, and this synergizes with both of the Imperialdramons very, very well. On top of which, he himself innately has jamming, which that ability synergizes more with the blue Imperialdramon, which is going to be our main Imperialdramon. Next, I'm running 4 copies of DemiVeemon. So DemiVeemon is a pretty okay card considering he has both piercing and jamming. So obviously having piercing means that we could use him to attack into the opponent's Digimon, and when he destroys the opponent's Digimon, they'll still take the security check, and then because he has jamming, then he won't get destroyed by the security check if it's a Digimon, and he ends up losing that. So he just has good synergy there, but he also has really good synergy with both of the Imperialdramons, considering he's really only used just as an alternate form of Paildramon to reduce the cost of our Imperialdramons. Speaking of our Imperialdramons, I'm running 4 copies of the blue Imperialdramon Dragon Mode. So the blue version of Imperialdramon, obviously he's going to have the same evolution abilities and requirements as the green one, where if this Digimon digivolves from a Paildramon or DemiVeemon, then its Digivolution cost is reduced by 2, so then he's just going to become 3 to digivolve into. Then the blue Imperialdramon naturally has jamming, and then he also has a very nice when digivolved ability where all of our Digimon with jamming become active. So this is really, really good because whether you're using DemiVeemon or Paildramon, they both have jamming, so you could swing at the opponent's security or potentially Digimon with both of them, and then deal some security damage, and then digivolve into Imperialdramon Dragon Mode, the blue version, and then he'll stand himself back up. And then when he stands himself back up, then you'll have all of the potential synergies of all of his inheritable sources triggering, where he could gain plus 1000 DP, he could draw some extra cards, he could just do a lot based off of just being able to stand himself up and having jamming. Blue Imperialdramon Dragon Mode is just a really, really solid card for the deck and one of the big focal points. Now, similarly to the blue Imperialdramon Dragon Mode, we're also going to be running green Imperialdramon Dragon Mode. So obviously the evolution requirements are the exact same, where if you digivolve off of a Paildramon or DemiVeemon, it's reduced by 2. And then this one innately has piercing. So this incentivizes that we want to attack into our opponent's Digimon. And then he also has the nice ability during our turn, once per turn, when our opponent's Digimon is destroyed by battle with this Digimon, then he becomes active. So he naturally could make himself more active for more potential attacks more than the blue one, but this one doesn't necessarily have jamming, We do need that DP buff to really start to utilize him so that way he could win a lot of trades on the opponent's Digimon. On top of which, he still does synergize with Paildramon's when attacking ability, because you don't always have to activate that because it is a once per turn. So you could use Imperialdramon's once per turn before Paildramon's, and then use Paildramon's once per turn after you used up Imperialdramon's, so he could attack quite a lot at the opponent's security. Imperialdramon Dragon Mode in green is definitely a very, very solid option to Digivolve up into. And then the last Mega of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Omnimon. So even though Omnimon can't Digivolve off of the green Imperialdramon, he still could Digivolve off of the blue Imperialdramon, and that's really all we're looking to do with Omnimon, is just Digivolve off of the blue Imperialdramon just because Omnimon is a really good card for the deck. Obviously, he has 2 really powerful abilities. When you Digivolve him to him, you can destroy one of the opponent's Digimon and all of the opponent's Digimon that share the same name as that Digimon. Obviously, removal is very, very good. And then he also has a nice when attacking ability where we could return a level 6 from its Digivolution source to our hand, and then he becomes active. So this is really good for Imperialdramon because obviously we do have some synergy with multi-attacking and standing up, so we still have that ability going off. And then on top of which, returning the blue Imperialdramon back into our hand means that we could later set him back up again to deal some really devastating damage, because as we already know, he gets 3 attacks if you Digivolved him off of Paildramon. The deck has a lot of different ways to attack multiple times to deal a lot of damage really, really quickly. And Omnimon is just a great card at doubling down and incentivizing that kind of gameplay. As far as the options go, I'm running 2 copies of Desperado Blaster. So Desperado Blaster is pretty good because its main ability is you get to discard 2 Digivolution sources from the bottom of all of the opponent's Digimon, and then if we have a green Digimon, then we get to rest one of our opponent's Digimon without Digivolution sources. So this is a really good card to set up because we still have a couple of green Digimon that we could use the rest effect with, but being able to wipe out the bottom 2 Digivolution sources off of the opponent's cards is very, very good because for the most part, that's kind of where the bulk of the abilities are going to be coming from. So getting rid of their inheritable sources is still a very, very powerful thing. And then obviously if we have a green Digimon, then resting one of our opponent's Digimon down is really, really powerful because both Imperialdramon in green and DemiVeemon both have piercing. So it kind of incentivizes the fact that they want to be rested so they can be swung into. So Desperado Blaster is still just a really, really good card. And then on top of which, its security effect is activating its main effect. So overall, fantastic card. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Positron Laser. So Positron Laser is another, obviously, green-blue support card. And then what it does is its main ability is you choose up to 2 of the opponent's Digimon and it can't attack or block until the end of the next turn, which locking the opponent's Digimon from doing anything is very, very powerful, especially when we could attack multiple times to try to make sure that we could out-damage the opponent. And then it also has an added benefit where if we have a blue Digimon, we get to return one of our opponent's rested Digimon back into their hand and then trash all those Digivolution sources. So not only does it lock up 2 of the opponent's Digimon, it also could return a rested or suspended Digimon back to their hand and act as a form of removal. So overall, this card is just an absolute fantastic card. And then on top of all of that, it even has a nice security effect where you get to choose 2 of your opponent's Digimon and then they can't attack during this turn, because if it's coming from the security, it's most likely going to be because the opponent's attacking into it. And then if we have a blue Digimon in play, then we get to bounce one of the opponent's suspended Digimon back to their hand, and then basically almost the same thing as the main effect. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis is really good because he is our memory fixing tamer, where if our memory is 2 or less at the start of our turn, then it becomes 3. And then he has a really nice when played ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 blue and 1 green Digimon among them into our hand, and then bottom the rest. His when play ability is really, really good because not only is it checking the top 3 so we get options to pick from, we also get to potentially add 2 Digimon into our hand, so it's almost like it's a draw 2 card. At worst, we're still going to be almost always adding a blue Digimon to our hand, considering the majority of our deck is blue, but the fact that we could also potentially see a green Digimon means that adding that potential Digimon into our hand just makes Davis even better. But I'm only running 3 of him because I feel like the deck just has a whole bunch of natural card draw, and it has a very solid draw engine where we really don't need to see 4 of this card, because we really don't need to play this card more than once or twice to try to dig through our deck to find more cards. But his security effect, being able to play him from the security for free, is always a definitely good thing to have, and I was even playing with reducing Imperialdramon Dragon Mode from green down to 2 and then putting Davis up to 4, so that's something you could definitely think about. I just felt like the 3-3 split between those two was a very, very solid thing because I was finding both of them relatively consistently. And then as far as other cards you could think about running in the deck, you could think about running the blue Upamon as an alternate Digitama in case you want to try to draw more cards. The opponent does need to have a Digimon with no Digivolution sources when you're attacking in order to draw a card, but with Desperado Blaster, that's not necessarily the hardest thing in the world to set up. Or if they just naturally have to play a Digimon, again, that's not very hard to set up. So if you're really fearing the lack of card draw, you could run Upamon as a good Digitama to just get more card draw with. You could also run Gomamon because Gomamon is really good for his inheritable ability. When the Digimon is destroyed, you gain +1 memory. There's just a lot of removal in the current format, so gaining a memory for having your Digimon get destroyed on the chance it does is still a very decent effect to have. If you want to go a little bit more into a more raw jamming strategy, you could just think about running Frigimon just for more jamming. If you really wanted to, you also could run Airdramon because Airdramon is just a decent Digimon for his security ability, where if he's revealed in the security at the end of battle, then you could play it for free. So this way you could get a champion out for free and really start Digivolving him really quickly to try to get ahead of the opponent. Or just having another body on board means that you could potentially get another attack in, and with the deck having a whole bunch of ways of multi-attacking, just the extra body on board could be very, very threatening. You could also run Bastimon, where if you want to cut the green parts out of the deck, then Bastimon is a very, very good Digimon to Digivolve into because it has a very cheap and efficient evolve cost for being an ultimate. And then if you want to continue to try to cut the green side out, you could run Leopardmon as the alternate Mega because he does have jamming synergy where all of your level 4 or less Digimon have jamming. And then on top of that, when you Digivolve into him, you could play a level 4 or less Digimon from one of your Digimon's Digivolution sources without paying its cost. So this kind of incentivizes more of that go wide strategy with level 4s, and then he gives all of your level 4s or less jamming. So that's really, really powerful in combination with Imperialdramon, where if you Digivolve up into Imperialdramon with a Leopardmon on the field and a whole bunch of small jammers, then you could use all of those small jammers for multiple attacks. So Leopardmon is definitely a really good card to think about if you just want to cut the green half out. In terms of other options you could play Let's Stop Fighting because your Digimon are going to be attacking into the opponent's security most of the time, ideally with jamming. They're going to end up in a rested state, so they're going to be open for the opponent to attack into. So Let's Stop Fighting is a really good card to where your opponent can't really swing into your Digimon with jamming to try to destroy them by battle. And then it also has a nice security effect of just adding itself to the hand, so that way you could then set up that type of play line. You could also run Vulcan's Hammer because it's Vulcan's Hammer. Just a free +1 memory is really good, and in the security you gain +2 memory can really screw up the opponent's plays. So overall, this is just a very fantastic option to think about. Another option you could think about is Ice Wolfclaw, because this is just another removal card where you bounce one of your opponent's Digimon back to their hand, and then all of their Digivolution sources get trashed. And then its security effect is activating its main effect. So if this is revealed, so this is really just going to be used as another form of removal if you really feel like you need to have more removal in the deck. And then lastly, you could think about running Ken. So Ken is a pretty interesting choice because he synergizes more with the green half, but if you do want to go a little bit deeper into the green side of things, then you could reasonably think about playing Ken because he is another memory fixer, and then when your blue or green Digimon destroys an opponent's Digimon by battle and yours survives, then by resting this card you gain +1 memory. So he could potentially extend your memory just from you attacking into your opponent's Digimon, which both DemiVeemon and the green side of Imperialdramon are definitely wanting to do, and it's not like you really don't want to sometimes attack into the opponent's Digimon if the opportunity arises and you're just going to win that trade anyway. So it's not like Ken is a really bad card because he's just incentivizing more of the green half. So these are just some other options you could think about. There's still a whole bunch of different cards that could synergize very, very well with the deck depending on how you want to play it. So it is going to be a very, very flexible deck and have a whole bunch of different ways that you could potentially build it. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of the deck. I definitely think the blue-green split might be a little bit awkward and a little bit slower, but it definitely has a lot of potential power to it. And even if you don't feel like you want to do that split, you could still go heavier on the blue and have a completely different variant of the deck. Or if you really just want to cut all of the blue out, there's an entirely different style of deck that you could play with all of the green cards. This is definitely going to be a really interesting deck and one to look out for just because of all of the flexibility it has, all of the options it has, and again, it has just so many different things going on that make it very, very powerful. So, as always, I'll have the deck list down in this description below, and feel free to tell me your thoughts about the deck down in the comments below. And as always, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.